This is great because Joel's really just providing us with the larger context and issues that we're grappling with, both as a world, as a nation, and as a college. So thank you for grounding the work that I'm going to be speaking to today, and really looking at the larger picture and how we can bring that within our schools here at Hunter. So before I start, I would love to know who's out there in the Zoom world. And if it's okay, if people, you don't have to turn your screen on, but if folks could just tell us, if you could just tell us your name and what program and school you're in, that would help us to make some connections. And I think also to contextualize some of the work that we're doing. So my name is Jody Polleck, and I'm in the School of Education. I'm the program coordinator and an associate professor in literacies. And so Joel really talked to us about sort of the larger contextual issues, and Joel particularly comes from us from a really important perspective around assessment. So I'm going to talk about the work that we've been doing within the School of Education and how we've been moving the work of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion forward, both as a School of Education and as a collaborative, a collective of faculty, staff, and students who are working to bring about change, both in how we do things at Hunter and how we do things in our communities. I'm then going to pare it down to the programmatic level and talk about the ways in which, for me as a program leader, have been making some programmatic changes and curricular changes to our work in literacies by really being intentional about the ways that we're infusing Jedi work into our curriculum, our assessments, and our instruction. So I'm going to sort of start big at the School of Education, speak to what we've been doing, and then we'll look at sort of a smaller programmatic level to talk about some of the things that Joel was speaking to earlier. I do want to apologize up front, and that my internet is unstable, much like my personality sometimes. The internet is also unstable. So I apologize in advance if I freeze. And if I do freeze and I just keep on talking, when I unfreeze, just let me know where I left off and I'll start back there again. So clearly I've normalized unstable internet. So let me just share my screen. And then afterwards, Joel and I just want to open this up to conversations that people want to have, questions that you have, and anything that you want to talk about, ways that we can also work together as a larger Hunter College. So let me start us off here. So I'm going to speak to a committee that was formed very grassroots within the School of Education. This was created back in 2016 by a group of faculty, staff, and students who came together during a very challenging time within our country. Particularly, we had new leadership, and we also had George Floyd and several other issues around racism, police brutality, inequities, deportation, that we were really struggling with as humans and as faculty, staff, and students working together in a community. So we put together this committee, very grassroots based. We would basically just come together and have lunch and talk about things that we needed to do, action that we needed to take, both within our communities and within the larger, the School of Education specifically. And so we've been together since then. It has been 6 years strong with some really lovely people, some of whom are here today, including Gina, Riley, and Jen Sampson. So the purpose of this committee was really to utilize and explore research and practices that really center equity and advocacy. So we have a larger conceptual framework within the School of Education, but we really wanted to do a deep dive into our expressed vision around diversity. and think about ways that we could revise and change our school climate so that we were being inclusive and responsive to the diversities within our school, but also engage in some really intentional and justice and equity-based work. And in particular, speaking to what Joel was talking about, is thinking about ways to dismantle and deconstruct white supremacy in our ways of being and in our instruction and our ways of engaging with students, and dismantle those biases and stereotypes that we know are so pervasive everywhere, and think about how we could really change our climate and participate in some actions collectively, and not just as faculty. So we are faculty, we are staff, we are students, we are alumni. We also have community members, particularly before the pandemic, who are coming in and doing some work with us. We've also worked so much with the Welfare Rights Initiative, who have been just wonderful. We've learned so much from them. And other organizations such as the New York City Men Teach program and the Black Lives Matter in higher education initiatives. The idea was to have shared leadership. So our committee is eventually became co-led with one faculty and one staff member. And we try to integrate students and get them coming as much as possible so that we really do have a shared responsibility and an ownership and leadership so that people feel empowered to get involved in the work. And so we had a multi-prong and a multi-tiered way in which we wanted to introduce change. And I'm going to speak to some of those initiatives and what they were. One of the biggest things that we brought in terms of changing school climate was just creating these community events, just like ACERT does, but within the School of Education, where we wanted folks just to come together. And this obviously picture is taken pre-pandemic when we were sitting very clothed and close. Without masks. Now we do all of this work in the remote Zoom space. But we wanted to come together collectively and have conversations among multiple stakeholders within Hunter College so that we can have conversations around justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and then speak to the actions that we could take moving forward when we left this collective space. So we have monthly meetings. Every month we come together as a committee, and then we plan these community events. So each year we have an annual keynote speaker, and we are sure to include, to center and highlight the voices of scholars of color. And we bring and invite them in, and we really do a deep dive into their theories and practices and how we can bring those for transformation within our own communities. So we started with Sonia Nieto. We've also had Django Paris, Bettina Love, and then this year we have Dr. J. Jamila Lescott, who is working with us. And these are all scholars of color, practitioners within education and counseling who are writing about equity work and doing the equity work and really leading that for us. So we like to bring in outside voices. And then 2 or 3 times over the semester, we have something called critical conversations, where we use the works of these scholars as a springboard to have conversations about what this looks like within our own communities. And those critical conversations are led by staff, faculty, and students. So I presented with 2 undergrads. Jen Sampson brought in high school students to come and speak around their justice-oriented work within New York City. So we really wanted to make sure that we were hearing multiple perspectives. And then in addition, we also have 2 to 3 times a semester, brown bag lunches, equity eats, where we actually do some reading and viewing of materials. So for instance, when Bettina Love was here, we read her book in the fall semester. And in the spring, we engaged with some of her TED Talks and some of her articles and things that she suggested. So every year, those brown bag lunches are basically like book clubs, but we also include audio, visual, shorter pieces. Dr. J has brought us a lot of poetry, spoken word that's been done by youth in New York City. as a way, as a different entry point for people to enter the work. So some folks could come in and be like, well, I can do brown bag lunches, but I can't do critical conversations. Or I'm going to bring my whole class to come and see your keynote speaker, but I may not be able to come to the brown bag lunch. So the idea is that we don't want to just have one way in which people can engage in the work. We want to have multiple ways that folks can do that. And as a school of education, for those of you out there who are in career services, who are in the library, who are in the English department and the arts and sciences, we are really open to collaborative and collective work. So anything that you're thinking about ways that we can do and work together, lift each other up, we are a very inclusive group, a very like joyful and loving group. So the more voices, the more collaborations, the better. So I thought I'd share with you just really briefly, Jen Sampson and others and I actually did some research around, we wanted to find out what was the impact of this work on students and faculty and staff who attended. And we found from surveys, focus groups and interviews that folks were coming out of these experiences saying that they were learning strategies for creating inclusive cultures. They had a better understanding for working with diverse students, and that they all plan to attend more of these events in the future. So that always speaks to us. You know, when you start seeing the same faces over and over again is wonderful. That means that we've created a community that is carrying over. We also heard from people that they were able to incorporate what they were learning from these experiences into their work. So obviously we train teachers and counselors in our program. So we were finding that students were saying that when they went out into the field, they were engaging in more culturally relevant, more culturally sustaining work. They were participating in more social justice events. So teachers were going out and counselors were going out and joining local activist groups, either within their schools or within their communities. We also found, we also found that people were able to make connections with each other. So we call those, Bettina Love calls them co-conspirators. So I'm not your ally, I'm your co-conspirator. So I'm not going to just, I think Bettina uses the thing of an ally is a person who's going to like bail you out of jail if you go to jail, but your co-conspirator is going to go to jail with you. So in these experiences, we had folks really connecting with each other and becoming each other's allies and co-conspirators so that we could have that shared load of advancing equity. And we were also bringing people from multiple perspectives and places. So it was really nice to have undergrad student sitting next to a faculty member, sitting next to our admissions, somebody who worked at admissions, sitting next to a high school student, sitting next to a local civil rights activist lawyer from New York City at the same table, having conversations about what the work looks like in a collective manner. So those community events for us as a committee were really important, but it's not, it is what takes up the most amount of our time, certainly for planning. Jen can attest to that. But it is certainly not the priority of the work that we do. So the work that we do also has involved several other, sorry, these slides are moving. These slides are, okay, there we go. The work also involves curriculum and student engagement redesign. So as Gina had mentioned, we have critical friends groups, which is where part-time and full-time faculty come together once a month to talk about their syllabi, their assessments, and their instruction. And we come together as a collective using a critical friends protocol to talk about ways that we're being really intentional about infusing equity and justice-based work into our courses, into our classes. And so those were really important moments for faculty to think about what they're doing and to work in a group with a group of people who have great ideas. We're also working to develop certificate and master's programs that center equity and justice work. And we also have a recruitment and retention subcommittee where we look at the students whom we're serving and ensuring that we're able to both recruit and retain our students of color, our more marginalized communities who come to Hunter College, to make sure that they're supported within the School of Education. And lastly, what I'll talk about is our development of these Jedi guiding principles. So we also developed a set core of guiding principles, and I'm going to put the link of that into the chat so that you can see. That. Let's see. Let me just stop share and grab the chat so that you all can see that. So together, we created Jedi guiding principles, which are basically, these were developed collaboratively with folks within the Equity and Advocacy Committee. We shared those with our student council. We also went through 2 years of feedback and revision, and we made sure to cross-list those with some state guidelines that came out around culturally responsive and sustaining instruction. So we created those guided principles, and the great thing is that we just officially presented those to the entire School of Education. So we provided everyone with a copy of these guiding principles so they could be familiar with them, and we had them do a self-assessment. So we gave them these guided principles, and they ranked on a scale how they felt they were doing on these areas around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And if we had time today, we would ask you to do the same. But instead, we're just going to give you the link here. And the link will provide you with just an Excel spreadsheet, because the first part about doing equity and justice work is really reflecting on who we are and where we are in the work, and really ensuring that we engage in self-reflection. As a white woman who is cisgendered and able-bodied, what is my role in doing diversity work? What is my role around doing justice and equity-based work? And these prompts allow folks to look at those. And we created these statements so that they could be used by staff and faculty to think about either your curriculum or your ways of engaging with students. So we wanted those to be as inclusive as possible. And so those are there for you to peruse later on. But our call to the School of Education was this. And let me just put this, is we wanted everybody to be involved. So as a school, how can we revise our entire mission and vision to include these principles? At the programmatic level, how can we change our key assessments so that they're inclusive of guided principles? For faculty, how are you revising your syllabi and your instruction so that you are inclusive of Jedi principles? And for staff, how do these principles serve as guidelines for ways that you serve and engage with students? How do you use these as ways to revise your admission criteria, your recruitment and retention efforts, your ways for supporting students? So they're a framework that we all wanted to use, so we'd had common language with a common vision for equity. And so our goal is to really use those to start changing the programs within the School of Education. And this will be my final just like little sort of unveiling of how this is working, is that as the program leader for literacies, I've done some of this work with my program. And so we came together as a group of faculty, and we read through these principles, and we also engaged in a brainstorming session. So we use Google Jamboard. I don't know if people are familiar with this, if you've used this with your students, but as faculty, we came together and we looked at the question, what are some words, phrases, or sentences that you would like to include in a revised mission or vision statement for our program? And the same can be done for career services, for the library, for an English department, what is your mission and vision, and how is it really inclusive around these Jedi principles? So we came together, we all made these little Post-it notes, put them over there, and then we talked about what we envisioned for a program that centered justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. And then we took that and we culled it down in order to put together a 4 to 5 sentence mission and vision statement that really said who we were and how we were committed to this work. We also brainstormed collectively some of the practitioners and scholars who do this work that drive the ways in which we think about that. And we fleshed those out as well. So who is it that we want to say we speak to that guide us and really center the work that we do? And so that ultimately we were able to create a shared mission and vision. It's in its draft form, so it's not really pretty at this point. But we have created that as a way for us to center our work, but also to help with our adjuncts in our program. So now we provide them with the mission and vision, with the guiding and principles, and we give them opportunities to revise, provide us feedback. And then once a month we come together, or sorry, not once a semester, in August and January before the semester starts. We work in very small groups, and we talk about the revisions that we're making to our syllabi. What new texts are you teaching? We talk about our assessments. How can we include in our rubrics more explicit focus around Jedi? We talk about our practices. What are the kinds of instructional activities that we're using to ensure that we are inclusive of all of the voices that are in our classrooms? And so that work has been really pivotal for us. And I will share with you our draft, and just in the let me just put that in the chat. And that's there. And this just gives you a sense of, for the literacy program, where it is that we are going with the work to make sure that we're not just saying what we want to do, but we're doing what we say we want to do. And that can't happen in isolation. And it has to be a collective where, as Gina said, we're making sure that all of those voices are involved. So that's my 20 minutes. I think we wanted to open it up. Joel, if you want to come on back, I don't know if, and take this time to see if folks have questions.